पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ बहुत सारे महाज खुले, कुछ हमने खुद खोले और काफी सारे हमारे खिलाफ खोले गए। आज के महाज
खतरे के नाम। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मैं हूं वजाहत सईद खान। खतरा है अमेरिका को पाकिस्तान के मिसाइल और न्यूक्लियर प्रोग्राम से। 70 की और 80 की दहाइयों से जब से पाकिस्तान न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स और उनके मिसाइल प्रोग्राम डेवलप कर रहा है, जब से लेके अब तक अमेरिका ने आज तक कम से कम मेरी नॉलेज में ये बात नहीं की। अमेरिका ने पाकिस्तान पे सैंक्शंस लगाई, अमेरिका ने पाकिस्तान को रेप्रिमैंड किया, अमेरिका ने पाकिस्तान पे रिस्ट्रिक्शंस लगाई, मगर आज तक किसी अमेरिकी ऑफिशियल ने ओपनली पब्लिक में ये नहीं कहा कि पाकिस्तान का जो मिसाइल प्रोग्राम है वो अमेरिका के लिए डायरेक्टली एक खतरा है। मगर अब ये भी हो चुका है। जो बहुत सारे सवाल जिससे उठते हैं कि अमेरिका के तरले करना, अमेरिका के लिए रेजिम्स को चेंज करना, अमेरिका जब बोले कि छलांग मारो तो पूछना किधर मारूं और कितनी ऊंची छलांग मारूं, इस सब का क्या फायदा हुआ। ये ब्रेकिंग न्यूज इस वक्त इधर अमेरिका में गर्दिश कर रही है। पाकिस्तान तो सो रहा है मगर हम जाग रहे हैं। आज का जो महाज है वो दो हिस्सों पर मबनी है। पहले ये हिस्सा जिसमें जल्दी से आपको बताते हैं कि थोड़ी देर पहले इधर जो व्हाइट हाउस के नंबर 2 हैं, जो प्रिंसिपल डेप्यूटी नेशनल सिक्योरिटी एडवाइजर जॉन फाइनर हैं, उन्होंने एग्जैक्टली क्या कहा है। और ये आपकी स्क्रीन की राइट हैंड साइड पे रॉयटर्स की ये ब्रेकिंग न्यूज आई है कि जो खुलासा देती है कि उन्होंने क्या कहा है। मगर पहले हम खुद उनसे सुन लेते हैं, खुद उनकी जुबानी सुन लेते हैं कि क्या बात हुई है। ये अलार्म बेल्स जो हैं इस वक्त रावलपिंडी में, जीएचक्यू में, एसपीडी में बजनी चाहिए, क्योंकि ये पहले पाकिस्तान की तारीख में नहीं हुआ। जो अब बाइडेन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन की आखिरी दिनों में आखिरी सांसें ले रहा है ये व्हाइट हाउस, इन्होंने ये अटैक पाकिस्तान पे किया है। सुनते हैं जॉन फाइनर साहब क्या फरमाते हैं, सुनिए।
Next, Pakistan. Recently, Pakistan has developed increasingly sophisticated missile technology, from long-range ballistic missile systems to equipment that would enable the testing of significantly larger rocket motors.
पाकिस्तान ने हालिया तारीख में लॉन्ग रेंज बैलिस्टिक मिसाइल सिस्टम्स और मोटर्स डेवलप किए हैं।
If these trend lines continue, Pakistan will have the capability to strike targets well beyond South Asia, including in the United States, raising real questions about Pakistan's intentions.
अगर ये होता रहा तो अनकरीब पाकिस्तान जनूबी एशिया, साउथ एशिया जो हमारा खित्ता है, उससे आगे अटैक करने की कैपेबिलिटी डेवलप करेगा और अमेरिका भी इस फहरिस्त में शामिल हो सकता है।
The list of countries that possess both nuclear weapons and the missile capability to directly reach the U.S. homeland is very small, and they tend to be adversarial towards the United States.
जो मुल्क अमेरिका पे अटैक करने की काबिलियत रखते हैं, जिनके पास ये रेंजेस हैं, वो बहुत छोटी फहरिस्त है उन ममालिक की, और ज्यादातर वो जो ममालिक हैं वो अमेरिका के दुश्मन हैं।
Russia, North Korea, and China. So candidly, it's hard for us to see Pakistan's actions as anything other than an emerging threat to the United States.
तो इसलिए रशिया, नॉर्थ कोरिया, चाइना जो ममालिक ये कैपेबिलिटी रखते हैं अमेरिका को टारगेट करने की, क्योंकि ये अमेरिकी दुश्मन है, इसलिए हम पाकिस्तान की इस बढ़ती हुई सलाहियत को एक खतरे की नजर से ही देख सकते हैं। बहुत बड़ी बात कर दी है जॉन फाइनर ने। आगे क्या कहते हैं?
Now, leaders across our administration, myself included, have raised these concerns repeatedly with senior Pakistani officials. We have been a longtime partner with Pakistan on development, on counterterrorism, and other security issues, including quite sensitive issues.
ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट बात की है कि हमारे लीडर्स ने पाकिस्तान से बातें कर रहे हैं। हमने पाकिस्तान के साथ काउंटर टेररिज्म वगैरह वगैरह, दहशतगर्दी के खिलाफ जंग पे बात की है, मगर कुछ सेंसिटिव इश्यूज में भी हमने एक दूसरे का साथ दिया है। क्या है वो सेंसिटिव इश्यूज? इमरान को हटाना शायद, उसामा को खड़काना शायद, वी डोंट नो, मगर अलूड कर दिया है कि हम हर इशू पे बात करते हैं, सेंसिटिव इश्यूज पे भी पाकिस्तानियों से बात करते हैं, मगर
We've provided support to Islamabad during difficult times, and we continue to desire a cooperative relationship in these areas of shared interest. That makes us question even more why Pakistan will be motivated to develop a capability that could be used against us.
मगर even though हमने इतनी मदद की है पाकिस्तान की, चुप रहे हैं हम। पाकिस्तान जो भी हरकतें करता है, हम कोऑपरेट करते हैं पाकिस्तान के साथ। ये तो खैर मेरा मौकिफ है, मगर क्या कह यही रहे हैं। इसलिए हम सवाल उठाते हैं कि पाकिस्तान इस चीज पे क्यों नहीं कोऑपरेट कर रहा। बाकी हर बात हमारी सुनता है पाकिस्तान, इस बात पे हमारे साथ पाकिस्तान क्यों नहीं बात कर रहा, क्यों नहीं सुन रहा हमारी बात।
Unfortunately, it is our sense that Pakistan has failed to take these concerns, and frankly the concerns of others in the international community, seriously, and continues to advance these capabilities. As a result, the Biden administration has implemented a series of steps to contend with further development of long-range missile systems. Over the last year, we've issued 3 rounds of sanctions against non-Pakistani entities that have provided support to Pakistan's ballistic missile program. And yesterday, we issued sanctions directly against Pakistan's state-owned National Development Complex, which the United States assesses is involved in the development and production of Pakistan's long-range ballistic missiles. The first time we have sanctioned a Pakistani state-owned enterprise tied to missile development. Simply put, we're going to keep the pressure on Pakistan regarding its long-range missile program, even as we also continue to seek diplomatic resolutions to address our concerns. And we encourage every other nation to do the same.
डंडा देते रहेंगे हम पाकिस्तान को, और हमने कल भी डंडा दिया है। इस डंडे की खबर आपने सुन ली थी। पाकिस्तान पे सैंक्शंस लगी हैं, ये कोई नई बात नहीं। पिछले 4 साल में जब से बाइडेन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन आई है, पिछले 4 साल में 7 बार पाकिस्तान या पाकिस्तानी कंपनीज या वो बैनुल अक़वामी कंपनीज जो पाकिस्तान के मिसाइल प्रोग्राम के लिए काम करती हैं, उसको पुर्जे फराहम करती हैं, उसको टेक्नोलॉजी फराहम करती हैं, पे सैंक्शंस लगी हैं। ये कोई नई बात नहीं, मगर आज इन्होंने अनाउंस किया है और एतराफ किया है कि पहली बार हुकूमत पाकिस्तान, रियासत पाकिस्तान, इस्लामी जमहूरिया पाकिस्तान की एक कंपनी जो नेशनल डेवलपमेंट कॉम्प्लेक्स है, एनडीसी, जो आपके टैक्स पेयर मनी से, हमारे टैक्स के पैसे से चलता है, हमारा इदारा है, मुल्क का इदारा है, रियासती इदारा है, प्राइवेट कंपनी नहीं है, उस पे भी अब इन्होंने सैंक्शंस लगा दी हैं, क्योंकि अब ये जो शक है, ये जो खदशा है, ये जो खतरा है पाकिस्तान का या पाकिस्तान की सो कॉल्ड रेड लाइन का, वो आगे आ गया है। ये होता है जब मुल्क अपनी सालमियत, अपनी सॉवरेंटी, अपनी सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट नहीं रखते। पाकिस्तानियों ने, पाकिस्तान के फौजियों ने, पाकिस्तान के मिलिट्री लीडर्स ने सालों एक गुन गाया है, एक तमाशा लगाया हुआ है कि हम हर बात सुनेंगे अमेरिका की, मगर ये बात नहीं सुनेंगे, ये हमारी रेड लाइन है। वेल, आपकी रेड लाइन आज उन्होंने क्रॉस कर दी है। आपकी रेड लाइन का उन्होंने खुल के दुनिया के सामने पहली बार कह दिया है कि आपकी रेड लाइन एक्सेप्टेबल नहीं। कहा है कि आप हर मौजू पे हमारी बात सुनते हैं, इस मौजू पे भी अब प्लीज हमारी बात सुनिए, वरना हमने वो कर दिया है जो हमने पहले नहीं किया। एक तो आपकी नेशनल डेवलपमेंट कॉम्प्लेक्स पे हमने सैंक्शंस लगाई हैं, और दूसरा, पहली बार तारीख में पहली बार कह दिया है कि आपकी जो नीयत है वो सही नहीं, आप हम पे खतरा कर सकते हैं इस किस्म के वेपन्स डेवलप करके। This is unprecedented. It is dangerous and it is bad news for the Pakistani national security establishment. मतलब it is bad news for the फौज। अब फौज क्या कर रही है? फौज वही कर रही है जो वो सालों से, बल्कि दिहाइयों से वॉशिंगटन और उसके जो पिद्दे हैं जैसे बरतानिया है उनके लिए करती है। अपने इधर मर्जी के एम्बेसडर्स भेजती है, अपने मर्जी के ऑफिसर्स भेजती है। कुछ ऑफिसर्स इनके की रिश्तेदारियां होती हैं, जो फेवर्ड ऑफिसर्स होते हैं, वो इधर आते हैं, कोर्स करते हैं, अलाउंसेस लेते हैं, इधर दोस्तियां करते हैं, रिक्रूट होते हैं और वापस जाके आपके ऊपर राज करते हैं। मगर आज इन्होंने कह दिया है कि बस बहुत हो गई। ये जब होता है जब आप एक के बाद एक कंसेशन, बार बार कंसेशंस, बार बार कॉम्प्रोमाइजेस करते हैं। ये एक इंसानी फितरत भी है और ये जियोपॉलिटिक्स का रूल भी है। जब अमेरिका हर तरीके से आपको ग्रीन लाइट करता है, आईएमएफ से लेकर एम्बेसडर के डिनर्स तक सबके लिए आप लाइन अप होते हैं, तैयार होते हैं, यस सर करने के लिए आप रेडी होते हैं। अमेरिकी एम्बेसडर को जब आपने पिछले दिनों में गवादर बुलाया था तो आपका दोस्त चाइना जो है वो खड़ा हो गया था, मगर क्योंकि आप दोस्तों की उस जो पुराने दोस्त हैं उनकी इज्जत नहीं करते, इन के लिए आप ज्यादा आई गेस फ्लेक्सिबल होते हैं, तो आप ये कह रहे हैं कि थोड़ा सा और लचक दिखाओ, थोड़ा सा और नाचो, थोड़ा सा और गाओ। ये डेंजरस किस्म का प्रेसिडेंट जो सेट हुआ है, आज मैंने इस ब्रेकिंग न्यूज से चंद ही मिनट पहले इन्हीं सैंक्शंस पे, जो नायाब सैंक्शंस लगी हैं, उन पे आज मैंने एक प्रोग्राम किया। माइकल कुगलमैन जो जबरदस्त एनालिस्ट हैं विल्सन सेंटर के वॉशिंगटन में, और आयशा सिद्दीका जो जबरदस्त एनालिस्ट हैं किंग्स कॉलेज लंदन की बरतानिया में। आयशा से बेहतर कम स्कॉलर्स हैं जो फौज को देखते हैं, और माइकल से बेहतर कम थिंक टैंकर्स हैं जो पाक अमरीकी ताल्लुकात को देखते हैं। दोनों को मैंने इकट्ठा किया, देखें हमारी क्या बात हुई। बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट शो है, शेयर करें, लाइक करें, सब्सक्राइब करें, कमेंट करें। मगर मैं खुद इसलिए इतना शायद वर्कड अप हुआ हूं क्योंकि मैं यूनिवर्सिटी के जमाने से पाक अमेरिकन बायलैटरलिज्म और ये जो मिसाइल डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम है इसको स्टडी करता आ रहा हूं। इतनी बड़ी डेवलपमेंट, इतना बड़ा तमाचा, और वो भी अपने आखिरी दिनों में जब कोई काम नहीं होता किसी भी रिवायत के तहत किसी भी अमरीकी हुकूमत का कि फॉरेन पॉलिसी पे कोई बड़ी बात करे, ये लोग चलते चलते आपको चपेड़ मार गए हैं। ये चपेड़ है आसिम मुनीर के ऊपर, ये चपेड़ है GHQ के ऊपर, ये चपेड़ है SPD के ऊपर, ये चपेड़ है पाकिस्तान के फॉरेन ऑफिस के ऊपर, ये चपेड़ है पाकिस्तान के एम्बेसडर के ऊपर कि ये कंट्रोल नहीं कर सके नैरेटिव। और अब ये ब्रेकिंग न्यूज दुनिया में लगी हुई है कि पाकिस्तान अपने चाचू अमेरिका को निशाना बना रहा है, और इसलिए चाचू अमेरिका ने उसके ऊपर नई सैंक्शंस लगाई हैं और लगाता रहेगा। और ये जब होता है जब आप खुद अपनी इज्जत नहीं करते। जब आप खुद अपनी इज्जत नहीं करते तो लोग फिर आपको कहते हैं कि और नाचो। तो अब और आप नाचें, और नाचने के साथ साथ जो बाकी जो थोड़े से सेल्फ रिस्पेक्टिंग लोग हैं वो बाकी मेरा प्रोग्राम देखें। शेयर करें, लाइक करें, सब्सक्राइब करें, कमेंट करें, दबा के इस प्रोग्राम को शेयर करें और कमेंट जरूर करें। टेक केयर, पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद।
पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ बहुत सारे महाज खुले, कुछ हमने खुद खोले और काफी सारे हमारे खिलाफ खोले गए। आज का महाज
Good morning, good afternoon, and a very good evening to you, wherever you may be. My name is Wajahat Saeed Khan. I'm an independent journalist based here in New York City.
And I'm Aisha Siddiqa, based in London.
And I'm Michael Kugelman, based in Washington, D.C.
All right, so it's time for our weekly South Asia briefing, usually featuring Mike Kugelman of the Wilson Center, but with a special star cameo appearance this time by Aisha Siddiqa. We, of course, know that a lot's been happening in South Asia. The Sri Lankan president has made his first foreign trip, choosing India. We know that the Indians are already under pressure here in the US because of ongoing cases against the billionaire Adani, who is close to Prime Minister Modi. We also know that other friends of Modi's, like Mr. Ambani, are maneuvering in Russia. But we are going to concentrate on Pakistan. Pakistan has been targeted yet again. This is the 7th time the US administration has targeted Pakistan within the last 4 years with a fresh round of sanctions, particularly targeting its long-range missile program, the Shaheen series, which has a range of almost 3,000 kilometers. The National Development Complex, Akhtar & Sons Private Limited, Affiliates International, and Rockside Enterprises are the four complexes / companies which have been targeted by the US. First of all, the big question we will be asking today, why the sanctions, and even more importantly, will they work? Then we are going to pivot to how these sanctions are being applied, but not other sanctions which are being debated as well. For example, those targeting Pakistan's military leaders or Pakistan's other rulers who have been engaged in anti-democratic crackdowns over the last few years. Then, of course, a question about Pakistan's own goal, scoring an own goal. We have news that at a recent Track 2 event in Washington, the Pakistanis actually did a bit of a boo-boo, a diplomatic boo-boo, and compared their own conflict with India to that in Ukraine and Russia. Aisha has some insights about that. We're going to be talking to her about it. And very importantly, Pakistan's old position that our missiles, guys, our missiles are for India, not for Israel or any other US ally. But guess what? The Indians are now partners with the US. And just saying our program is India specific doesn't make the US less nervous. These are some of the questions I'm going to be putting forward to my two esteemed colleagues. Aisha, I will start with you real quickly. Will the sanctions work? 7 rounds of sanctions in 4 years, yet the Pakistanis are keeping the head down, doubling down. So what do you think is going to happen, and why these sanctions?
Well, firstly, I think the Foreign Office has responded, Pakistan's Foreign Office. It has said that there is, these are unfavorable and unjust, and it spoils the balance, the strategic balance. It harms the strategic balance in South Asia. This was expected, and they're shocked as well, of course. Now, why is it has happened? I think it's because of the technology. It gives Pakistan a second strike capability. I don't think that Pakistan is aiming at any country in the Middle East, never was, and never is. It's focused on India, of course. This kind of a technology, which is a capacity building technology. I mean, it's Shaheen 3 is not just about second strike, how it builds second strike capability. It's long range. It's a precursor for another technology that is being developed, which allows Pakistan, missiles to MIRV, which is, multiple targeting. This is what Pakistan wants to do. This is the capacity which Pakistan wants to attain. So this kind of sanctions is basically to kind of stop wherever there is technology, maybe leaking from the West or coming from somewhere, from reaching Pakistan. Some observers in Pakistan already argue that although there are sanctions, it's not going to have a huge impact because, it depends on whether they'll be constantly looking and slapping Pakistan on its wrist every time Pakistan is found, or any company is found, or any country is found selling some components, some equipment to these three companies which have been sanctioned, and fourth, which is a public sector company. This could have a crippling effect, but I don't think it's going to deter Pakistan from its program.
Okay, all right. Now you really set it up because there's a lot of moving parts in your argument. I'm going to circle back to that own goal, which you mentioned by the Pakistanis actually comparing the conflict with India with Ukraine and Russia. But Mike, break down the context. Firstly, it's not just the Pakistanis who have been sanctioned. Other countries have been sanctioned as well. Break it down for us, and then really try to percolate this, Mike, to the sanctions debate within Pakistan. I know you visited the region. I know out there in DC, there's a clamor for change from within the Pakistani diaspora. People like Ro Khanna, who is an important member of Congress, has been mentioning, for example, the Magnitsky sanctions against elite Pakistani leaders. A lot of folks, regular viewers of this program, are asking today, I did one version in Urdu earlier, that why are sanctions being placed for security purposes, but why aren't any sanctions being slammed for democratic purposes by the Biden administration? A lot of normal folks, regular folks, have that question.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you had noted before, looking at these recent sanctions, these recently announced sanctions, these did not come out of nowhere. We've seen multiple rounds of sanctions over a relatively small amount of time. And I think what's particularly significant about this latest round is that it actually does target a state entity. There had been Pakistani companies that had been targeted previously. Chinese companies had been targeted previously. This time around, there were some commercial entities that were targeted as well. But I see this perhaps as a bit of an escalation in terms of U.S. sanctions policy, in the sense that this time around, it did decide to target a state entity, and I think that might reflect a rising level of concern on the part of the U.S. Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about what this could mean for the future of Pakistan's ballistic missiles programs. I defer to scholars like Aisha and others, but as I would just say that we know that this is not a new story. I mean, the U.S. has placed sanctions on Pakistan on a variety of occasions over the years for its nuclear weapons and recently for its ballistic missile program. This does not appear to have impacted in a big way the capacity for Pakistan to continue to build out these programs, and I think that that will likely remain the case. In terms of the broader picture, we're talking about apples and oranges here, right? These are sanctions that the U.S. Imposed on Pakistan for really national security reasons. The U.S. concluded that its national security interests dictated the need to do this because of its concerns about the potential scale and reach of these weapons. When you're talking about human rights sanctions, that's completely different. And you and I have discussed this many times, that the current government here has concluded that it would not serve U.S. interest at this moment in time to start focusing on human rights sanctions. The U.S. has never, so far as I know, targeted entities, individuals in Pakistan, military leaders, whatever the case, with sanctions that are tied to concerns about human rights or democracy or anything like that. We could talk about the reasons for that, but it's basically just apples and oranges. The one final point I'll make is this whole business about India, is this sort of rising concerns about India-Pakistan conflict. It's an interesting time to be having that discussion, because I would argue that this has actually been a relatively calm period for India-Pakistan relations. And as we know, there's an LOC truce that's been in effect for more than 3 years. India has expressed some concern about an upsurge in attacks in parts of Jammu and Kashmir, but for the most part, that the relationship is not in a good place, but it's in a relatively stable place. I would describe it as being in a status of a cold peace right now. Quite frankly, I think both India and Pakistan have other matters that they want to focus on a lot more. India is much more concerned about its China challenge. Pakistan has all kinds of things going on at home internally.
Right. Okay. Well, I must take a cue from that. And I agree with you. It's firstly apples to oranges. It's a completely different debate. And the US, not just recently, but has for long ignored Pakistani leaders, whether in uniform or out of uniform, and given them a free pass when it comes to human rights. But coming back, two debates here. One, this cold peace business. The Pakistanis have long, for decades now, told Western observers that, listen, our program is India-centric. You guys don't have to worry about your friends in the region. You don't have to worry about the Israelis of the world, for example. Now, the Pakistanis have been very specific and very loud and very proud about this, hoping that Washington's interest is, well, not converted into nervousness. But now, Aisha, that the Indians are quite tight with the Americans. They're a part of the Quad, huge trade partners, strategic partnership in play, intel sharing, so much stuff. This India is not the same India that Pakistan was targeting 15, 20, 30 years ago when it started making these noises about its program in the early stages of when it went officially nuclear. But saying that we are India-centric today could and is seemingly backfiring now, doesn't it? It doesn't get Pakistan a free pass anymore to say, oh, we're not Israel-centric, we're India-centric, because now India-centricism in Washington means something else. Do you think that they need to change their strategy about specifically calling out India?
I think what Pakistan definitely needs to do is improve relations with its neighbors, all neighbors, not just India. But I think that even America and American policymakers understand that Pakistan's concern is India. Look, it's not easy being a next door neighbor of a big country, which is ambitious, which has global power ambitions. So I think to that level, that would be understood. But I think what United States would be more careful of and would be looking at is that no new Kargil kind of activity happens, no limited wars happen between the two countries, and they manage to resolve their differences amicably and not engage in wars. And to a large extent, some of the problems have been resolved. I mean, Pakistan had claimed not a very long time ago that its focus was geoeconomics, not geopolitics. But for Pakistan to become center of that, have economic activity and reach out to its neighbors, it will be good. But I don't think that that precludes Pakistan having its weapons for its security, and Pakistan would continue to kind of even if relations improve, Pakistan's main focus will be India. That is a fact, and I don't think there'll be a problem in that.
Mike, same question, different context. So the Cold War, which you mentioned, and the Cold Peace rather, and this geoeconomics, which Aisha has just alluded to, all of these remind me of a chap called Mueed Yusuf, former national security advisor in Pakistan, currently on some sort of sabbatical at a university, but still quite linked in with the national security establishment of that country. Was in Washington recently and was speaking to his counterparts in the State Department. The Chinese were there, the Indians were there, and effectively said, hey guys, two things which were important and came to my notice. One, that hey guys, if there's a fight next time between India and Pakistan, it could look like the Ukraine-Russia fight. That made people nervous. And the second thing, of course, which he said he was snubbed by the Indians. He's like, don't ignore South Asia. And the Indians there in that conference said, oh, nobody's ignoring India. South Asia is a different matter. We're not being ignored. So all of this takes me back to the same question I just pitched to Aisha, but to you now. Pakistan's old excuse that this is India-centric, this program, not Israeli-centric. Does that fly now in Washington? Because if you look at the seventh round of sanctions in 4 years, and you're saying this time it's an escalation, I agree, you're right. What does this mean? Do the Pakistanis need to change tact about declaring their weapons India-centric?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, there's been some debate in recent years about whether it's time for Pakistan to try to direct its foreign policy away from an India-focused one. And I think that's proven very difficult. And indeed, this notion of a shift from geopolitics to geoeconomics is meant to, in theory, to focus on this idea of moving beyond the problems of India and toward focusing more on developing connectivity and trade links to the broader region. But that hasn't worked out very well to this point. And I would argue that to the extent that Pakistan has been shifting more toward geoeconomics, it's been very limited. I think that we can see a few very concrete examples, such as trying to work with a few Central Asian states, specifically Uzbekistan, in one particular case that comes to mind, to develop a transnational rail project that would also go through Afghanistan. But Pakistan, I think, clearly is not willing to move beyond the Kashmir issue. Or actually, I guess I should say that the establishment, the military in particular, is not ready to do that, not ready to accept the status quo, so to speak. And I think that is obviously going to have an impact on any type of step taken to take on a foreign policy that would be broader and that would go beyond the issue of India. But I mean, I would argue that there might be an opportunity right now, in the sense that for now, at least, the relationship with India is a bit more stable. You don't have dialogues going on. You don't have more trade happening. There was talk about opening up more border trade after the floods, and all that didn't really happen so far as I know. But there might be some openings that could be availed of. But honestly, I don't think they are that inclined to talk to Pakistan either, for reasons that we can understand. But to your point, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the U.S. is concerned that these missiles, or the development of these missiles could be produced in a way that could pose a threat to India, obviously that's something that would be of significant concern to the U.S. We could talk about some of the tension points that have crept into U.S.-India relations, but that is a very significant strategic partnership, as people like to describe it here in town. Not an alliance, but a strategic partnership.
Yeah,
but I think there's other issues at play here. I mean, the fact that Chinese companies have been sanctioned by the U.S. in the broader context of its concerns about Pakistan's ballistic missile program suggests some degree of concern about the perceived role that China might be playing in helping Pakistan with these plans too.
Oh yeah. Okay, agreed. I'm not going to start calling India America's South Asian Israel yet, but some people in Pakistan would definitely be starting to see it that way. Aisha, last round of questions on this, and then we move to the rest of the region. Dehyphenation. I was watching one of your programs recently where you said that the Americans have effectively decided to dehyphenate Pakistan. A long time ago, they decided to dehyphenate Pakistan from India, but now recently they've also decided to dehyphenate Pakistan from Afghanistan and treat it as its own problem, dealing it with for its weapons, for counterterrorism purposes, and for the economy. Now, this is an important question because Pakistan has long hyphenated itself with either the Indians, and when that became old fashioned, then with the Afghans on the other side. Now, the Pakistanis are sort of on their own, finally, according to your analysis in that program I was watching, on economic, CT, and weapons, nuclear weapons purposes. Does this bode well for Pakistani foreign policy in the future?
I think this gives Pakistan an opportunity to mature itself, mature its thinking, and see where it can pitch itself vis-a-vis big powers, global powers, and even regional powers. Where do you want to be? I mean, you don't want to be constantly linked with India. Pakistan has to have its own strengths, and Pakistan does have its own strengths, which it needs to explore and put it out on the table. Going back to let me get back to what Michael was saying. Now, definitely, India is not too keen to talk to Pakistan, but problem right now is Pakistan, and something which Pakistan hides quite well. Pakistani military is definitely not eager to talk to India either. Now, with an independent status, I think this is something which the generals will have to confront. That you have to kind of start allow the country to be built in a different way. Domestically, of course, politically, it has to be done. Afghanistan, definitely, United States, since the day United States left Afghanistan doesn't have that kind of significance for the US. And so it's important that Pakistan on its own, it's time. And I think the important thing which is worth realizing is that hyphenation in the past used to work because it used to bring packets of money. Now that packets of money is not going to come. Pakistan-US relation is, of course, very transactional, and it will remain transactional and dependent and with a lot depending on how Pakistan performs as a country. I think the three issues on which United States is going to focus, while dealing with Pakistan, of course, the big ticket item is the nuclear program, but then there is also Pakistan's economy. And of course, relations with China. United States is keen that Pakistan keeps it balanced, doesn't go entirely in the other camp. But for that, of course, it also understands that Pakistan needs to be confident and stand on its feet financially, economically.
Right.
These are the three issues on which there will be more conversation.
Right. We have to wrap up soon. So this is the last round of questions. This one's for you, Mike, and this is an important one. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about this. We named some folks who are expected to be a part of the incoming Trump administration. Rick Grinnell was one of them. He's been quite loud and proud, both personally and politically, regarding Khan. He's been in the news again, not for the right reasons in Pakistan. There's been a lot of gay bashing surrounding him by parts of the Pakistani media. You saw how that blew up a couple of days ago. Now, two things. One, you said that folks who are making pro-Khan noises, like Zal Khalilzad, like Rick Grinnell, are not expected to be a part of the Trump administration. But Grinnell is going to be an envoy for special missions. How do you feel? I don't want to debate the gay bashing of the Pakistani military-backed media. Well, let's not waste our time there. The less we say, the better. But what do you think of the increasing clamor, the bipartisan clamor now, both from the Dems and the GOP and members of this new incoming administration, which are increasingly sounding pro-Khan? Are things changing in Washington? Could Khan fans watching the show see change coming?
Yeah, I mean, I've said all along for a number of weeks, including in these discussions with you, that I do expect the Trump administration to make some noise about Khan. I mean, clearly there have been conversations between PTI supporters and leaders and Trump's people, and perhaps Trump himself. Trump definitely remembers Khan. I mean, that's very clear. And indeed, the Grinnell tweets, I think, suggest an indication of what could be to come. But I have to say that Geo really shot itself in the foot, or if you want to say that the army shot itself in the foot to make those types of comments, to bring that so much more attention to an issue that it would rather there not be any attention about at all.
Agreed.
But as I said before, it's one thing for senior administration officials, including potentially Grinnell, if he's confirmed, and others, including Trump, to post messages about Khan on social media. That would, of course, bring all kinds of attention to this in Pakistan. That's very different, though, from actually having this administration develop a formal policy focused on thinking of how to pressure the Pakistani military to release Khan. And my question, I guess it's a comment, but it could be a question too, an open question, is what would be in it for Donald Trump to actually try to wage a campaign to get Khan released from jail? Why would that matter to him? How would that serve his interest? How would that serve U.S. interest? I've posed this question to a number of supporters of Khan who have been pulling for Trump to become Khan's champion, and I haven't gotten a really good answer yet. So I just sort of leave that out there.
Short of him being a handsome guy, short of that, I don't see any reason Khan would ignite Trump's interest, Mike. But I do feel that the bipartisan clamor, which is increasing, may lead to some sort of change. I do know, however, that folks in Islamabad and Rawalpindi are getting quite nervous about the increasing noises which are coming out of Washington. Aisha Siddiqa of King's College London, Michael Kugelman from the Wilson Center. I feel like you two have history in Washington. Aisha was the Wilson Center's first Pakistan fellow, where she wrote that remarkable, resounding masterpiece, Military Ink, or rather inked the last bits of it. And Mike was just coming in those days. He was he still is a young man, isn't he? But he was really, he was just starting off in those days. Did you guys intersect at all during those days in Washington?
Oh, absolutely. One of my earliest memories of being at the Wilson Center is meeting Aisha and having some very interesting conversations with her. So it's always good to come full circle back to it now.
Well, I'm glad I bought some holiday cheer with this last minute adjustment to our weekly South Asia briefing, inspired by Mike Kugelman's Foreign Policy South Asia briefing. There's a lot of other elements he's mentioned in his brief. Check them out. One of them including, of course, the new Sri Lankan leader's first visit to India and India's own billionaires maneuvering in the US and Russia. We don't have the time for that. Mike's got to head to a meeting. Aisha's got to go dominate the west side of London and do what she has to do over there at this time of night. I will catch both of you very soon. Share, like, subscribe, and comment. Please support independent media. Follow Aisha at I Am The Drifter. Follow Mike Kugelman at Michael Kugelman on Twitter. I'll speak to both of you soon. Take care.
पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ बहुत सारे महाज कुछ हमने खुद खोले और काफी सारे हमारे खिलाफ खोले गए। आज के महाज